In this video, I'm going to show you how to use GitHub to freely host your work for this class. Like I said, you can purchase your own web hosting, maybe from Namecheap or GatorHost, and your own domain name. It can be really cheap. You can probably do all of that for around $10. But my recommendation, at least for this class, just so that you're kind of dipping your feet in, is to use GitHub, which we're going to get into a lot more in the future in other courses. But for this class, all you really need to know is that GitHub provides you with free web hosting. So the first thing is I'm just going to show you on my computer. I have my Atom project. I have my doc.html, my images folder, my CSS folder. It's exactly like you saw before. This is what it all looks like. Haven't changed anything. And I'm going to upload this to GitHub and create a repository for it that's going to be publicly accessible so that people can view it as a website. So I'm on github.com. Just visit github.com and create an account. A free account is fine. You don't need to pay anything. And you're going to make a new repository. A repository is kind of like a big collection of files. If you take front-end web development or other development classes with me, you'll be using GitHub quite a bit. So I'm going to click New Repository. I'm going to give it a name. So I'll call it My Cool Site or something like that. You'll want to leave it as public. You can't really do private repositories unless you pay. And we'll say Create Repository. So it's going to show you a bunch of code and stuff right here. What we can do is simply click Upload an existing file. And whenever we click that, it has us drag and drop our files over here, or we can just choose them. So I'm just going to choose them. And then I can select my files. If I want to do one at a time, that might take a bit, so it's a little bit easier just to drag and drop them. So I'm going to drag my whole folders into this and let them do their thing. So as they're uploading, make sure that we are dragging the root and not the actual folder itself, because then it'll add this name to the folder, and we don't want that. We just want the actual root HTML file here. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a little bit. So after all of our files are uploaded, we need to commit the changes, and I can just say added files and say commit changes. You don't need to mess with any of the other settings. And again, we'll go over a lot of this later, but don't worry about it now. It's just processing. It may take a little bit of time because it has to upload all of your files. And you should see a screen like this where all of your files now have appeared in little folders, and you have your HTML file there. So this all looks good. The last thing we want to do is go to our Settings tab, and you're going to just scroll towards the bottom, and there's a section that says Github Pages, and we want to say Master Branch, which is just saying you're going to turn on this thing called Github Pages, which is basically free hosting. And where do you want to do that? We're just going to do it in the master branch, and I'll hit Save. Okay. If I scroll back down on that settings page, it's going to say your site is ready to be published at, and it gives me an address, and this is the address that you can use. Now, our site isn't actually working because we don't have an index.html file, which I'm going to get into right now. So one of the things that I've mentioned before in the past, but I'll reiterate, is that whenever we visit a website, we're actually visiting its index page. So whenever I visit a site like Google, I'm actually visiting Google's index page. Or Facebook, I'm visiting Facebook's index page. The slashes after the address, so for instance, CameronBuckley.org, this is just my index page. If there was like a slash that was like, I don't know, downloads or something, that means go within a folder called downloads and display that. In fact, here, we're visiting, if I was to do /images or /CSS, I'd be visiting those folders. And if I typed in my doc.html right here, I'd be accessing my document directly. And it works. That image is really big, so it's taking a while to load. But we want people to just be able to visit our website directly, right? They just want to be able to go to our web address and see it. So we need to rename this to index.html. So we can do that a couple of ways. We can actually do that on GitHub, which I'll just show you how to do that. But typically you would do it beforehand, right? You would rename it here, which I'll do first. But I'll also rename it here. So now, eventually, after maybe an hour or two, it'll be published on that GitHub Pages site. So this all looks good. That's the very basics of how to freely host your site for me to view. Whenever you're turning work in, you can just copy that web address, right? This one right here. Whatever yours is, it'll be like your username and then your repository name, and just send that to me.